How long are you going to type?
Okay, go ahead.
Did you know that?
What?
Did you know we were getting a lot of questions?
No, I did not know that we were getting questions. I didn't know that anybody had any interest in what we were doing.
People want to know. They want to know a few things. So
What do they want to know?
I have some questions for you.
What do people want to know?
Well, the first thing that they want to know, well, mostly what they want to know, it's about comedy. That's why they're asking you. They figured you could help them.
Okay.
What are you working on?
I'm working on some comedy.
All right, well, we'll just start, and we're hoping to make this a little bit of a series, hopefully short videos, informational videos, educational ones. So how did you get into comedy full-time? How did you get to be this man?
How I got into comedy or how I got into comedy full-time are two different questions.
Okay, well, let's start with full-time.
Full-time, I got in when I got a phone call from a guy who wanted to produce a one-man show. On Broadway was his idea. We didn't actually make it to Broadway, but he called me because he saw a video clip that I had done. This was long before YouTube, so it was a videotape. And it was grainy and it was awful, and he described it later as saying, I could tell that it was a human. It was shaped like a human, but everything else was awful. But the audio content was good enough that he could tell that I was funny. He flew me out to Phoenix to do a week headlining at a club in Phoenix to see how the material worked in front of an audience, and it worked great. And so I got a long-term contract from him to produce a one-man show about my comedy, and that is how I launched into a full-time career in comedy.
What year was it?
That was 1998 or 99, I think.
1998 or 99.
98 or 99, yeah.
That's a pretty long time to be doing comedy.
You're telling me.
About, what, 23 years?
Yep.
23 years. That wasn't Crazy Love, was it?
Yeah.
The one-man show was Crazy Love?
Yep. That was it. That was how it started. It was a chance meeting from the guy who produced. He wanted to produce a show. He didn't have any particular specific show in mind, but he was looking for comedy content that lined up with family values that he wanted to produce. And so we built a show around my stand-up.
All right. That's kind of cool. I actually didn't know that. I thought that you went full-time just sort of happened.
Actually, full-time comedy is a terrifying thing to do, and I don't recommend that anybody does that. I recommend you hang on to your day job for as long as you can until it is literally ripped from your white-knuckled fingers while you try to hang on to it.
Well, that was my next question.
Okay, well, what is your next
I was
question?
going to say, would you recommend doing the route you took or even going full-time now?
I don't think that there is a path that you can take into comedy that is going to be identical to mine. I think everybody has a different path in. And so trying to duplicate what anybody does is not possible. Being a full-time comedian, it means so many different things that the bottom line is you have to replace your income. You have to eat, and you have to have some form of income, money coming in order to be able to eat. And so when your income from comedy replaces the income that you're making at your job, then you can start thinking maybe about making a full-time leap. But I will tell you that when comedy is your living and you need to do gigs in order to keep the lights on and to buy groceries, it takes a lot of the fun out of it. It's way more fun when you can use your comedy income as sort of an extra income on a hobby level. Because when I first started getting paid to do comedy, it was opening in a club downtown in Indianapolis, and I had a day job. And so what the comedy did was it gave me an extra $300 a week on top of what I was already making. That's pretty sweet. You know, if you can, there aren't very many part-time jobs that will pay you what you can make, in a night of comedy after you get halfway good at it. If you can make 150 bucks a night on top of your regular day job, that's the way to do it. It's double dipping, and it beats having a second job or a third job. But as far as full-time goes, you should push that off for as long as you possibly can.
So, what advice would you give to aspiring comics or people who might think they're funny? Because you've mentioned to me before that you don't think that clubs are the way to go. You think that that's more of a 90s and 80s thing. So what's the advice? What should they do? Should they find their local comedy club and make a set, try it out? What's the thought process?
Comedy clubs are usually a large city phenomenon. They don't have comedy clubs in smaller to mid-sized towns, and so most people who are starting out, well, I didn't have a comedy club in my town where I lived. I had to drive an hour and 20 minutes to Indianapolis to find an open mic. The value of a comedy club is that they at one time when I got in, they actually drew an audience. There were people that were there to see comedy, and so it gave you an audience that you could try stuff out on. The comedy club scene is different now than it was when I started out, and you're not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to have a savvy, comedy smart audience. And so if you go to an open mic, a lot of times the open mics are put together by amateur comedians or people that are dabbling in comedy themselves, and so they put a show together. And it's oftentimes at a bar or at a coffee house or someplace where the audience isn't necessarily there to see comedy. And that's a whole different dynamic. If you're forcing comedy on an audience that is not enthusiastic for it, it's much harder to get an accurate feedback and to gauge how well you're actually doing, because you've got a hostile audience that's watching you try to be funny. And so if you've got access to a comedy club that has a vibrant open mic, then go and try out your material. It will be it's good feedback, or can be good feedback, but you want to make sure that your comedy is not geared just towards open mic audiences, because open mics are dirtier, open mics are more casual, they're less formal, and so if you are consistently making open mic crowds laugh, 90% of the crowd is other comics, and so if you're making other comics laugh, that's different material than what the general audience uses. Now, I've seen a lot of people at open mics make mistake and going, man, I'm killing every week at the open mic. And it's like, yeah, well, no one's going to pay you to do that material. It's one thing to make a room full of comics laugh, because you have to be vulgar and outrageous, and you have to say things that you could not possibly say in civilized company. So if you're going to go to open mics to try out your material, then do actual material that has some value outside of the open mic. And so the easiest way to gauge it is if you are killing at open mics, if you are consistently doing really well at open mics, then you're doing comedy wrong, because you're not going to be able to sell that anywhere.
So you're actually saying that you should hope to get booed off the stage at an open mic.
You don't necessarily want to get booed off the stage, but your material, some of the material that you're doing at the open mic shouldn't work well with other comics, because other comics have a different standard, and they're very tough. They don't evaluate good material correctly. What makes other comics laugh is outrageous, vulgar, blue material, and you have to get more and more and more blue. And the comedy club, the comics at open mics have pushed the envelope so far outside of normal person sensibilities that yeah, if you're killing at the open mic, you are not going to be able to do your comedy anywhere except at the open mic.
So where else could they practice? Do you think there's merit in online, even though the audience is behind screens?
Yeah, any chance you get to stand up in front of people and try to make them laugh. You don't even necessarily have to be standing up. If you're at your job and there's a board meeting or any place where there's people, and the opportunity to try to make them laugh is viable. And so you don't have to wait for an opportunity to get on stage and hold a microphone and have a spotlight hit you. You can gauge whether or not you are funny by how the people in your life interact with you. I tell people in my comedy class, I tell people, if when you're talking to people, they are laughing with frequency, that's something you should pay attention to. If people are coming up to you unsolicited and asking you to repeat stories that you've told before. If somebody comes up to you and they're like, tell that story about the time that you were taking the trash out and the raccoon came at you, tell that, the story, tell that story again. If people are asking you to repeat stories that they've heard you tell, that's a clue. But if you are able to detect when somebody else tells a joke and it makes you cringe because you sense that they've done it wrong. If somebody else tells a joke, it doesn't work, and you know why it doesn't work. All of these things are indicators that you probably have what it takes to be a funny person. Now, just having the ability to be a funny person is light years away from actually being able to do comedy intentionally. But that's the indicator. It's really as simple as asking yourself, honestly, when I talk, do people laugh? And if people laugh when you're talking, then you're funny.
Do you think that comedy can be taught?
It depends on what you mean by can comedy be taught. If you are a funny person who is untrained, then yes, there is some training that you can get that will help you take your natural abilities to be funny and be intentional and learn some techniques for getting the most out of it. But if you don't have a God-given sense of humor, then there's nothing that anybody can do to force it into you. So yeah, you can learn how to be more intentionally funny if you have a sense of humor. But if you don't have a sense of humor, then you should stick to accounting.
Where should people go if they want you to teach them comedy?
If people would like me to teach them comedy, that's an excellent question.
Thank you. It's like I wrote them beforehand.
If people would like me to teach them comedy, I can do that. Go to johnbranyan.com and sign up for membership. We do a thing called the Comedy Roundtable, where we get together and talk about comedy with amateurs and professionals, and we brandy ideas around. And I also have a course online, and you can find all that stuff at my website.
What was the website again?
johnbranyan.com, JohnBranyan.com.
All right, I think that's everything. Would you like to go back to your comedy now? Thanks.